I'm Brian Marok with Beta USA, and today we're going to walk you through replacing your clutch discs on an X-Pro 4-stroke model. So the first thing we're going to do, if you're using a 2-stroke, you want to make sure your fuel's shut off. On the fuel-injected bikes, we don't have to worry about that. So we're going to lay the bike down on the ground so that it's easier to access the clutch, and we don't have to worry about any oil coming out of the cover while we do that. Now that the bike's been on its side for just a minute, all the oil has drained away from the clutch cover, we can go ahead and remove that. If you notice, I put on some rubber gloves just because we're going to be working with some oil in the clutch plates here, and it just helps clean things up a little bit quicker. So first thing we're going to go ahead and do is remove the brake spring from the clutch cover. A set of needle nose pliers to do that, pops right out. And then we're going to remove the clutch cover itself. I like to use an impact for disassembly, but on reassembly we're going to go ahead and use a T-handle and a torque wrench. So for disassembly though, the impact makes things go pretty quickly. Go ahead and pull out all the bolts, make sure the cover's loose. If you're not too familiar with it, you just want to make sure you keep track of your longer and shorter bolts and make sure that they go in the right holes. You'll notice if you've got it wrong though. Go ahead and set those aside and remove the clutch cover. I'm going to set that aside. So the Betas have a diaphragm spring clutch, and you have the 6 bolts here. You want to make sure and remove those in a crisscross pattern so that it evenly releases the load on the spring here. We're going to go ahead and do that with the T-handle so that we can break loose all of the nuts first, break loose all the bolts first. Once you have that torque released, we're going to go ahead and release them a little bit at a time in a crisscross pattern. That allows the spring to release its pressure evenly. And you'll get to a point where they just kind of spin freely. You know that that spring has unloaded all of its energy there. Okay, now that all of them are nice and loose, we're going to go ahead and get them all the way unthreaded. And I like to remove the collar here with the bolts in it so that you retain the same adjustment position, but I will show you how to check that here to make sure that you're in the right spot. So that's going to come loose. I'm going to go ahead and remove this one bolt, and I'm going to show you these hash marks here. You have a 1, a 2, and a 3. And what that indicates is the step position on this adjustment ring here. That allows you to adjust the pressure on the diaphragm spring and changes the feel in the lever. But we're going to go ahead and make sure that that goes back in the number 2 position that it comes in stock, and we're going to set that aside. And we're going to go ahead and remove the diaphragm spring, and then you have a washer in here that you want to carefully pull out. We're going to go ahead and remove the pressure plate. I'm going to set that aside. And then we're going to pull the plates out. Now, you can get your fingers in here and get a hold of the tangs of the clutches and pull this out, but most of the time you're going to leave a couple of plates in there. So we're going to go ahead and pull those out and set that aside. Now those last couple plates, a lot of times you're not going to be able to get down in there and pull those out. So we're going to use either a flathead screwdriver or a little pick to get down in there and allow you to pull that out evenly. I have a 90-degree pick here. We're going to go ahead and get down in below that last clutch plate so that we can slide everything up out of there evenly. Now that we have all the plates removed, this is a good time to inspect your clutch basket for any wear. You're going to look at all the grooves here and make sure that there's no irregular wear patterns on any of these fingers. You can do that visually. You can also do that by just checking with your fingernail or your finger to feel for any irregularities. On the Betas, you also want to inspect these dowels. You'll notice this one is nice and smooth. There's no issues. Again, you might see some sort of wear patterns in here. it's a good time to replace them. They're not very expensive, and it's easy to do, as you can see. So we're ready to install our new clutch discs. We have the fibers, which we've had pre-soaking. I like to let them soak at least overnight. Some people like to let them soak until there's no air bubbles, but you know, it's a really good habit to just have a clutch soaking in an oil bin. As you can see, nice little Tupperware with just whatever engine oil or transmission oil you're running in your motorcycle, and just let them soak. The Betas have 2 different fiber plates, and they are indicated by a color mark on the side of the plate itself here. So let me dab off a little oil so we can see. You'll notice it's got blue. The blue goes on the inside and the outside. So that's going to be the first disc and the last disc that you put in. Some of the other discs don't actually have a paint mark, but some of them will be green, and those are the ones that go in the middle. So we're going to go ahead and get that fiber disc in started. And now this is a standard clutch that's going to alternate between a fiber and a steel plate. So now that we've got the fiber in there, we're going to go ahead and get the steel installed. While you have the steel out, you're going to notice that these are stamped. So they have, one side is going to have a rounded side and one side is going to have a flat side. You want to make sure that these steels are all facing the same direction. I like to make sure that the sharp side is facing outwards. So we're going to go ahead and install that. And we're just going to alternate the fibers and the steel plates. It's okay if there's a little bit of extra oil on the plates. It's not going to hurt anything. These should all slide into place without any major resistance. If you are getting resistance, it might be because they're going in at an angle, but there shouldn't be any real issue getting these plates to drop into place. Okay, so now we've got our last steel in there. Again, we're just going to verify that that is the blue plate, that is the different color than the interior plates. And we're going to get that last friction disc installed there. All right, so we're going to reinstall the spring and the pressure plate and the throwout bearing. And while we're doing that, we want to give everything a good inspection, make sure that there's no irregular wear patterns or anything like that on the parts before we reinstall them. So we're inspecting the diaphragm spring here, make sure that there's no chipping or any sort of wear or rub marks, things like that. You want to make sure your throwout bearing is installed correctly. It needs to slide down over the shaft inside of the clutch basket here. That's your push or throwout shaft from the other side there, from the clutch master, clutch slave. We're going to inspect the pressure plate here, make sure again that there's no issues with it, and then we're going to go ahead and drop that into place. Slides right down over all the dowels. It's really hard to mess that up on the install. We're going to go ahead and set the pressure plate. Back that up. We're going to go ahead and put the diaphragm spring in place there. Hold that. And again, we didn't remove the bolts from the installation ring here, so everything's just going to go right back into place. And we're going to get those started by hand. And we're going to come back through with the T-handle. And again, we're going to tighten this in a similar pattern to the way we removed it, and that's going to be a crisscross. So we're just going to run these down until you get a little bit of pressure on all of them, and then we'll go ahead and do the crisscross pattern to tighten them up. We're going to go ahead and hit these with the torque wrench once everything's tightened up. Okay, so once I'm starting to feel a little bit of pressure from the bolt bottoming out there, we're going to go ahead and make sure they're all bottomed down, and then we're going to switch over to the torque wrench, and we're going to tighten this to the factory spec, which is only 10 Newton meters. So again, we're going to do that in a crisscross pattern. Once I do all 6, I like to go around in just a circular pattern just to double check that everything is tightened down. Oop. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and install the clutch cover, but before we do that, we're going to inspect this gasket and the sealing surface to make sure that there is no damage to the gasket and that you're going to get a good oil tight seal all the way around. You go ahead and wipe down any oil residual that might have spilled while you were taking the cover off. Make sure it's nice and clean. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the clutch cover itself. We're going to make sure all of the oil is off of the cover sealing surface. And we're going to go ahead and drop that into place. Grab your bolts. And again, on these clutches, covers, it's pretty easy to find which bolts are going in the wrong spots. But we're going to go ahead and feed those all in and run them down with the T-handle. Now, you don't want to go too tight until they're all ready to be torqued. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and grab the torque wrench one more time, and these are also set at 10 Newton meters. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is go ahead and reinstall that brake spring. So you want to make sure that the outside of the spring is on the outside of the brake pedal, because if it's not, the rider's boot can catch the tip of the spring sometimes on the brake pedal. So we're going to go ahead and install it into the cover first, and we're going to grab it with some pliers, and we're going to feed it into the brake pedal there, just like that. Last but not least, give it all a good wipe down, get rid of all those fingerprints and oil smudge. And that wraps up the clutch on the 4-stroke X Pro, and it's ready to get back out there on the trails.